I got the eviction notice while I was standing in the Jakarta rain, and I knew, before I even opened it, that my mother had finally done it. Let me take you back so you understand how we got here. My name is Katie, and I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in one of those families that looked perfect from the outside. Big house in the West Hills. Christmas cards with everyone smiling. My parents, Richard and Susan, ran a small commercial real estate firm, and my older brother, Derek, was their pride and joy. Derek could do no wrong. He got average grades, never finished college, bounced between sales jobs, but in my parents' eyes, he was destined for greatness. Me? I was the backup plan. The one who should be grateful. The one who should know her place. I learned early that nothing I did would ever be enough. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Washington. They came to the ceremony but left early to catch Derek's beer league softball game. I got accepted into the Foreign Service. My mother's first question was whether I'd finally be making enough money to pay them back for raising me. That comment stuck in my throat for years. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. You're not alone. I bought my first house when I was 27. A small craftsman bungalow in the Beaumont neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I saved every penny from my first posting in Lima. I didn't ask them for help. Didn't want it. The day I closed, I called my mother to share the news. Well, she said, ice clinking in her glass, I suppose you'll need us to co-sign when you want to upgrade to something livable. I told her I'd paid cash. The line went quiet. Then she said, how nice for you, and hung up. 3 years later, I got the assignment that would change everything. Cultural attaché to the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, Indonesia. It was a dream posting, a step up, a chance to make a real difference in U.S.-Indonesia relations, and a bump in pay that would set me up for life. But it meant leaving the country for at least 3 years, maybe 5. I spent weeks getting my house ready. I interviewed property managers. I updated my will. I made sure every utility, every insurance policy, every piece of documentation was airtight. My house wasn't just a house, it was my proof that I'd made it without them. The day before I left, my family came over for dinner. I made my grandmother's pot roast recipe, set the table with the good dishes. I thought maybe, just once, they'd be proud. Derek showed up an hour late, smelling like a bar. My father spent most of the meal on his phone. My mother walked through every room, inspecting, her mouth in a tight line. You're really going, she said. It wasn't a question. I am, I said. It's an incredible opportunity. She looked at me with something I couldn't read. And what happens to this place while you're off playing diplomat? I have a property management company. Everything's handled. She ran her finger along the mantel, checking for dust. Seems irresponsible. Leaving a house empty like that. It won't be empty. I have tenants lined up. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. If you say so, dear. Jakarta was everything I'd hoped for and more. The work was intense, the city was chaotic and beautiful, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I called my property manager, Linda, every month. The tenants, a young couple, both teachers, were perfect. Rent on time, no issues, house in great shape. I sent them a holiday card my first Christmas away. They sent back a photo of my living room with their small Christmas tree in the corner. It made me cry. My parents never asked about the job. In our quarterly phone calls, My mother talked about Derek's new girlfriend, their remodeled kitchen, a cruise they were planning. My father mostly grunted in the background. When I mentioned a successful trade negotiation I'd helped facilitate, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," in the same voice she used to use when I showed her a crayon drawing. I stopped calling as often. 18 months into my posting, Linda called me at 2 in the morning, Jakarta time. I knew immediately something was wrong. "Katie, I don't know how to tell you this," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I got a call from a lawyer today. Your parents claim they're selling your house." The room tilted. "What?" "They say you abandoned it. They have some kind of paperwork. I told them I represent you, that you're employed abroad, but they said," she took a breath. "They said you haven't been in contact with them, haven't paid property taxes, haven't maintained the property. They're claiming adverse possession under Oregon abandonment law." Hit that like button if you already know this is about to go sideways. You have no idea how bad it gets. I didn't sleep. I pulled every document I had. Property tax receipts, paid automatically through my bank. Insurance, active and current. Utility bills, autopay, every single month. Mortgage, paid off, but I had the deed, the title, every piece of paper that said this house was mine. I called a lawyer in Portland. A good one. Expensive. "This is highly unusual," he said after I explained. "Oregon does have adverse possession laws, but they require continuous occupation, open and notorious use, and a claim of right. Your parents would need to prove they've been living there or maintaining it as their own for a statutory period. If you have tenants and a property manager, their claim should be dead in the water. So why are they doing this?" He paused. "Sometimes families do irrational things when money's involved. Or control." "Do your parents have financial problems you know of?" I didn't know. I hadn't asked. I'd stopped caring. "Here's the problem," he continued. "You're abroad. You can't appear in person for hearings. And your parents have hired a lawyer who's apparently convinced a judge to issue a preliminary hearing on abandonment. If you don't respond properly, they could win by default." My hands went cold. "I'll handle it," he said. "But I need you to authorize me fully. And Katie, this is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my mother's smile at that last dinner. The way she'd run her finger over the mantel, like she was already deciding what she'd change. "Yes," I said. "I'm prepared." What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that my parents had already moved my tenants out. They'd shown up with a sheriff's deputy and paperwork that claimed I'd defaulted on a non-existent second mortgage they said they'd co-signed. The couple, terrified and confused, had packed up and left. Linda called me in tears. She'd been locked out of the property. The locks were changed. When I called my mother, she answered on the first ring. "Hi, honey. Sweet as pie. How's Indonesia? What did you do?" Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "My house, Mom. My tenants. The locks." "Oh, that." She sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Katie, you left. You've been gone almost 2 years. We had to step in. The place was falling apart." "That's a lie. The neighbors were complaining. The yard was a mess. You weren't responding to our calls. You never called. And we had to protect the neighborhood property values. Derek's lawyer found an option for us to take over the property temporarily until you came back. If you ever do. My vision blurred. You can't do this. It's already done, sweetheart. We're listing it next week. We'll put your share in a trust for you. After expenses, of course. You should be grateful we're cleaning up your mess. I hung up. I sat on the floor of my apartment in Jakarta, 6,000 miles from home, and I felt something inside me go cold and sharp. Comment if you've ever had someone gaslight you this badly. I need you to know I see you. And I promise, this story has an ending. Here's what my parents didn't know. When you work for the State Department in a diplomatic posting, certain protections follow you. Your property, your assets, your legal matters, they don't just disappear because you're overseas. The Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations has provisions. And more importantly, the U.S. government does not take kindly to interference with the personal affairs of its foreign service officers. Especially when that interference could be construed as coercion or fraud. I didn't tell my lawyer this right away. I wanted to see how far they'd go. I needed documentation. Evidence. I needed them to commit fully to this betrayal so that when I pulled the trap shut, there'd be no escape. My lawyer filed motions. Requested hearings. Submitted my financial records. Every piece of paper that proved I'd maintained the property, paid every bill, fulfilled every legal obligation. My parents' lawyer, some slick guy Derek knew from his country club, filed countermotions claiming I'd verbally agreed to transfer the property before I left. That I'd asked them to sell it and send me the money. That I was mentally unstable and had cut off all contact with my family. That last part almost made me laugh. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks out. My lawyer said he could handle it remotely, that I didn't need to come back. But I knew better. I called my supervisor at the embassy. Explained the situation carefully, professionally. She listened, asked a few questions, then said, "Katie, I'm going to connect you with the legal office. This might fall under the protections we offer foreign service officers." It did. The State Department's legal office was thorough. They pulled records I didn't even know existed. Every communication I'd had with my property manager. Every wire transfer for property taxes. Every rental agreement. They contacted my tenants, who confirmed they'd been illegally evicted. They even pulled security footage from my neighbor's doorbell camera showing my parents entering my house with a locksmith. But the real ammunition came from something else. My parents had listed the house. They'd staged it. They'd held an open house. And at that open house, my mother had told potential buyers that I'd abandoned the property after a mental breakdown and that they were doing me a favor by selling it for me. A realtor at the open house had recorded parts of the walkthrough for her Instagram. The video was still up. I watched it on my laptop in Jakarta. My mother, standing in my living room, gesturing to the fireplace I'd restored myself, saying, "Such a shame." She just couldn't handle adult responsibilities. We tried to help her, but some people just aren't cut out for real life. I watched it 3 times. Then I sent it to my lawyer. "This is defamation," he said. "And fraud. Katie, I think we can not only stop the sale, I think we can file a countersuit." "Not yet," I said. "I want them to finish. I want them to think they've won." Subscribe if you want to see how this ends. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for the final act. The hearing happened on a Tuesday. I flew back to Portland, my first time home in nearly 2 years. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. The courtroom was small, beige, fluorescent lights humming overhead. My parents sat on one side with their lawyer. Derek was there too, wearing a suit that didn't fit right, looking uncomfortable. When I walked in, my mother's face went white. "Katie." She stood up, hand to her chest. "Oh my God, honey, you came home." I didn't look at her. I sat down next to my lawyer and folded my hands on the table. The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair, reviewed the documents in silence. Then she looked up. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, you're claiming that your daughter abandoned her property, despite evidence of continuous tax payments, insurance, utility bills, and rental income?" My parents' lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Patterson has been out of the country for nearly 2 years with minimal contact with her family. The property was not being properly maintained? I have a signed affidavit from the property management company contradicting that," my lawyer interrupted. "I also have testimony from the tenants, who were illegally evicted by the Pattersons without cause or proper notice." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Illegally evicted?" My lawyer slid a folder across the bench. "Security footage, Your Honor. The Pattersons changed the locks and removed the tenants without going through proper eviction procedures. They also made false claims about a co-signed mortgage that doesn't exist." My mother's lawyer was flipping through his papers now, looking panicked. "Furthermore," my lawyer continued, "Ms. Patterson is not simply out of the country. She's a cultural attaché with the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, serving in an official diplomatic capacity. Her property and personal affairs are protected under State Department protocols. Any attempt to seize or sell her property without proper authorization is not only illegal under Oregon law, it's a potential violation of federal statutes governing interference with diplomatic personnel." The room went very quiet. My father leaned over to their lawyer, whispering harshly. My mother was staring at me, her face slack with shock. The judge set down her pen. "Do the plaintiffs have anything to add?" Their lawyer stammered something about a misunderstanding, about trying to help, about family disputes being complicated. "This isn't a family dispute," the judge said coldly. "This is attempted theft." Motion denied. "The property belongs to Ms. Patterson, free and clear. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, you are ordered to immediately return all keys, access codes, and any property you've removed from the premises. You're also barred from entering the property or contacting Ms. Patterson's tenants or property manager." She looked at my lawyer. "File for damages if you'd like. I suspect you'll have a strong case. Tap that like button if you felt that gavel drop in your soul." We're not done yet. I walked out of the courthouse into the gray Portland drizzle. I was halfway to my rental car when my mother caught up to me. "Katie, wait. Please." I stopped. Didn't turn around. "We didn't mean," her voice cracked. "We thought you weren't coming back. Derek said you probably met someone over there, that you'd stay in Indonesia and we'd be stuck dealing with your mess. We just wanted to help." I turned around then. Looked at her. Really looked at her. She was smaller than I remembered. Older. Her makeup was smeared from crying, and her hands were shaking. "You wanted to help," I repeated. "Yes. We're your parents. We were trying to. You told strangers I had a mental breakdown. You called me unstable. You kicked out my tenants and changed my locks and tried to steal my house." My voice was level. Calm. "You didn't do this to help me, Mom. You did this because you couldn't stand that I succeeded without you." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Derek's business failed, she said quietly. 3 months ago. He owes a lot of money. We were trying to help him. We thought you wouldn't mind. You have your fancy job, So you decided to rob me. We're family. No, I said. We're not. Not anymore. I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched her standing in the rain, getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared. I spent a week in Portland before flying back to Jakarta. I met with Linda, apologized for everything she'd been through, and gave her a substantial bonus. I contacted my former tenants and offered them the house back at a reduced rent for a year as an apology. They accepted. I walked through my house alone one evening. My parents had taken some things, a lamp, some books, the good kitchen knives. Petty theft on top of everything else. But the bones of the place were still there. Still mine. I stood in the living room where my mother had told strangers I'd had a breakdown, and I felt nothing. Not anger. Not hurt. Just a strange, quiet peace. They'd tried to take this from me, and they'd failed. My lawyer did file a countersuit. For the illegal eviction, the defamation, the attempted fraud, the emotional distress. The case took 8 months to resolve. My parents settled. They paid damages to my tenants. They paid my legal fees. They paid a substantial sum to me, which I donated to a Portland non-profit that helps families stay in their homes during financial hardship. The money didn't matter. What mattered was the public record. Court documents don't lie. Anyone who Googled my parents' names would find it, the case, the judgment, the facts. Their reputations in Portland's small business community, the thing they'd spent decades building, took a hit. Derek called me once during the settlement negotiations. "You're destroying them," he said. "Over a house. Over nothing." "It wasn't nothing to me," I said, and hung up. I'm still in Jakarta. My posting got extended. I'm up for promotion next year to Deputy Chief of Mission. I bought another property here, a small apartment near the embassy. I might stay. I might not. The choice is mine. My house in Portland is still mine. Same tenants. They send me pictures sometimes, the garden in spring, the Christmas lights in December. It's not home anymore, not really. But it's proof. Evidence. A reminder. Last month, I got a letter from my mother. She didn't send it to my work email, which she has, or my diplomatic address. She sent it to the house in Portland, and Linda forwarded it. The letter was 4 pages long. Apologies, explanations, justifications. She missed me. She was sorry. She'd been under stress. Derek had needed help. They'd made mistakes. At the end, she wrote, "You're our daughter. We'll always love you. Please come home." I read it once. Then I put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'll respond. Maybe I won't. The thing I've learned, the thing I wish I'd known when I was younger, is that you don't owe people access to your life just because they're family. Love isn't obligation. And forgiveness isn't mandatory. They made their choices. I made mine. If this story hit you somewhere deep, leave a comment and let me know. And subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when the people who should protect you become the people you need protection from. I think about that last dinner sometimes. My mother running her finger along the mantel, already imagining the house as hers. My father on his phone, not even pretending to care. Derek showing up late, expecting to be welcomed anyway. They saw my leaving as abandonment, as weakness, as an opportunity. They didn't see that I'd spent my whole life preparing to leave. That every achievement, every careful step, every dollar saved was me building a life they couldn't touch. They taught me I couldn't depend on them. They just didn't realize I was listening. The house was never really about the house. It was about proof. It was about standing in a room I'd bought with my own money, in a career I'd built with my own hands, and knowing that I didn't need them to tell me I was enough. I already knew. And when they tried to take that from me, I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I didn't try to make them understand. I just reminded them that underestimating me has always been their biggest mistake. If you're watching this and you see your own family in mine, I want you to know something: you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You don't have to shrink to make others feel big. And you don't have to let people steal from you, not your property, not your peace, not your future, just because you share DNA. Sometimes the people who gave you life spend the rest of yours making you pay for it. You don't owe them that debt. You never did. My name is Katie. I'm a cultural attaché in Jakarta. I own a house in Portland that I might never live in again. And I'm free.